If you're in the UK, then a very good morning to you. If you are joining us from Indonesia, then a very good afternoon to you. Asti has really introduced our panelists today, so it really is for me to give a general warm welcome to you all, but also to give a little bit of flavor to this particular marketing information event. UK TNE Opportunities in Indonesia, which is brought to you by Cormac Consultancy Group, who specialize in internationalizing higher education. On the panel today, the Cormac Group is represented by its founder and chairman, Charles Cormac. Britcham has quite a considerable debt, and I put that in a very nice way to Cormac Consulting and to Charles for helping with the establishment of our Human Capital and Education Centre at Britcham, a new innovation that now has 10 universities as part of a unique new panel. Thanks, Charles. And Charles has been ably assisted in that project with Britcham by his director, Aziz. Thank you very much also, Aziz. Some of you will know Oliver Anderson, representing Ask Consulting as the managing director. Oliver was on one of Britcham's earlier webinars, I think back in May or June, in the earlier sequence, and has been a member of Britcham for some time now, and is an active participant in our Human Capital and Education member focus group as well, and I believe one of the subgroups there. It's a particular pleasure for me to welcome Inez Septeno, who just reminded me that actually it was some 10, 12, even 15 years ago, she mentioned, that we last met. Doesn't time fly? She's head of division of international cooperation, the Office of International Cooperation at UNAS, Universitas Nacional. Welcome to you too, and welcome to all our guests. TNE is a very hot subject in Indonesia. It has been actually for a while, but there seems to be an escalation. There seems to be a momentum gathering, and part of that, without doubt, has to do with the commitment and drive of the new Minister of Education, who in turn is being mandated by President Jokowi to develop a lot more relevance to the needs as they relate to national goals. So I've just picked out 5 sectors that are of particular interest, I think, for people that that want to deep dive into the TNE opportunities. EdTech itself, as the new Minister of Education has emphasized on the use of technology, the digitization of the entire education sector, in fact, both for institutions and for the recipients of education, the students. Digital tech, artificial intelligence generally. In 2019, President Jokowi outlined that the government plans to implement AI to improve the bureaucratic system in Indonesia in order to make changes more quickly, make decisions faster, and act faster on the ground to changes that require leadership. Thirdly, I note e-commerce. E-commerce is an ongoing and growing trend in Indonesia as the biggest consumer for e-commerce in Southeast Asia. Based on a report by Google and Temasek in 2019, Southeast Asia has 11 unicorns, and 6 of those are actually from Indonesia, namely Gojek, Tokopedia, Bukalapak, Ovo, to name just a few. In 2020, Gojek became Indonesia's first decacorn. I wonder what comes after decacorn. Fourth, infrastructure. Special economic zones are being developed throughout the country to attract foreign investment. They're offering various types of tax incentives for foreign businesses. interconnected toll roads are planned, as are ports, and all of these are going to come from the President's National Budget Plan. And fifthly, and of considerable interest to a country that produces an awful lot of oil and coal, so the traditional fossil fuel driven type economy, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources have plans to implement electronic vehicles, solar energy, power generation from electricity. And this can be seen through the electric powered taxi launched by Bluebird recently. And as an organization, Britcham, I can share with you that the work being done by my colleagues also on this call, Shella and Chenny, who represent the business center or our overseas business network that support market access, we have had unprecedented levels of interest from the tech sector as they relate to renewable, clean energies, energies that are much more friendly to our environment. So I think that's just by way of overview of sectors that are likely to drive interest from TNE, and certainly sectors that are aligned with national interest and national goals. And with that now, really, it gives me pleasure to pass the baton over to Charles to navigate our way through this particular webinar, UK TNE Opportunities in Indonesia, proudly presented by Britcham and in association with Cormac Consultancy Group. Charles.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'd like to just start by paying tribute and thanking Chris and the team at Britcham for the support they've given us in pulling this event together. Particularly like to thank Shella and Chenny and Asti, who've been remarkably supportive and helpful. The idea for today's event really is to give you an overview of Indonesia as a market. It has huge potential for partnerships with British institutions, particularly TNE relationships. It's a market of 271 million people, 117 million of those are under 25, and just those figures alone give an idea of the potential scope and scale. And when you consider that currently there are a very limited number of UK universities with TNE partnerships here, probably 4 or 5, you can understand what the potential is. I think it's also worth noting that Indonesia is developing in terms of, Chris mentioned, the Minister of Education pushing now for the internationalization of higher education in Indonesia. But as a market generally, it's becoming a much easier place to work, and has moved up a remarkable 47 places in the world ease of doing work tables over the last 4 or 5 years. So to begin with, I'm going to hand across to my colleague Aziz, who most of you will know. Aziz will talk you through an overview of the market. We're then going to hand across to Ines from UNAS, who's going to talk you through a presentation on her institution. And we've asked her to do that because UNAS is an excellent private university in Indonesia, and private universities are likely to be the core partners for most UK universities, certainly in the short term. And we thought it would be a good idea to allow you to understand what a university looks and feels like in Indonesia. And then Oliver will do a session around some of the regulatory issues that we need to be aware of. So I will hand across without further ado to Aziz.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Chris and colleagues at Britcham for organising the event. And of course, thank you very much to our colleagues and partners amongst the UK universities who have joined us this morning. This is a brief overview of the UK TNE opportunities in the sense of the academic opportunities, the way we understand them from the UK. So the idea is to have a 10-minute exploration journey, and I hope you've all are all able to see the screen. So the idea is to cover Indonesia as a market, have a look at the TNE environment and trying to see what is happening, and conclude with a brief overview of the opportunities. And you've already heard from Chris how fast things are moving and the key priority sectors in Indonesia, which should inform the way universities and academic partnerships can evolve in the market. So Indonesia, everyone knows, it's 14,000 or even more islands, very large country, the largest Muslim country with over 270 million inhabitants, a very young country with about half the population under the age of 30. And you can see in terms of the bubble demographic, it's a different kind of bubble that we can see in Indonesia with 71 million people under the age of 14. In terms of wealth, we're looking at an annual GDP per capita when adjusted for purchasing power in the order of $12,000 per year. And as Charles said, Indonesia is really opening up to international business. So the ease of doing business rank in 2019 was 73 out of 190. 6 years ago, Indonesia was ranked 120th. That's also a reflection of the opening up of Indonesia to international trade deals, the ASEAN agreement. So it's a very open economy, or opening up economy. In terms of the education sector, massive growth in university enrollment, growing from 5 million in 2010 to 8 million in 2018. In terms of how these numbers are distributed, it's vastly at undergraduate level with almost 7 million. Then you've got about 340, 330,000 at postgraduate, and doctoral level is about 43,000, which also gives you an idea of where the gap may exist. In terms of the gross enrollment, which is an important parameter, because it tells you in terms of the capacity of existing HEIs to accommodate all qualified students, is about 36%, so about 2/3 of students, qualified students, cannot find university places. There is a very big and buoyant private sector, and as Charles said, that's where we see the TNE opportunities lying, and it's about 59% according to the UNESCO data. How does this distribute in terms of disciplines? Or, as you'd expect, social sciences, business and law are the bulk of the graduating students at the moment. So we'd expect to see a change with those priorities that Chris has identified. STEM is sees a large demand enrollment. Arts and humanities lags behind, but that's quite common to developing economies. Where does the UK sit in terms of outbound mobility? We're far behind Australia, and that's to be expected, both in terms of because of distances, because of the trade links between Australia and Indonesia. The US and Malaysia share the second and third place. The numbers are very, very similar. And anyone who's been involved in a TNE partnership in Malaysia or Singapore will know that there are a large number of Indonesian students traveling to Malaysia to enroll on UK franchised degrees. In To the UK, it's about 3,000 students. The HESA data breaks these 3,000 students almost equally between undergraduate and postgraduate. So you're looking at just under 1,400 as undergraduate students and about 1,500 between postgraduate taught and postgraduate research. The TNE data, the latest that was published by HESA, when you exclude the Oxford Brookes numbers, you're looking at about 650. It's 645, but everyone knows that these numbers from HESA are rounded to the nearest 5. So, and it's almost 60% online blended, and I'll talk about that later on, and just under 300 face-to-face, with one key player from the UK that is probably most of these 290 face-to-face students. What does the higher education system look like in Indonesia? You've got two parallel systems. The one that is general, that education, higher education system that all of us will be familiar with in the UK, but there is the parallel system of Islamic institution, which is common to all Muslim countries. And the system is supervised, regulated by the Ministry of Research, Technology and Higher Education. In terms of higher education sector, you'd find polytechnics, academies, institutes, and universities. You've seen the distribution of enrollments between public and private, 59% in the private. We've got about 245 public higher education institutions and over 4,500 private HEIs. The admissions to Indonesian higher education varies by institution. For the public institution, it's usually the school certificate as well as a joint entrance examination. And the competition for state university places is very high. Private institutions can have their own admissions test. Right, specifically about TNE, Indonesia is not a major host of TNE programs as we stand. We're all familiar with the 50,000 that are in Malaysia, and we've seen that in Indonesia, it's about 650. What currently exists is joint and double degrees with Australian, German, Japanese, the Netherlands and South Korean universities. The competition from Australia is because of the distance I said before, but there are significant scholarships as well as initiatives such as the Colombo Agreement. Germany and the Netherlands have very low tuition fees, so they've got that advantage over the UK. Japan and Korea provide very generous scholarships for Indonesian students to travel to that part of the world. UK universities, there are some double degrees. There's increasing arrangement at PhD level. The vast majority require mobility, but this is changing, and there is one UK university that has been operating in Indonesia for a long period of time, offering double degrees, all offered in Jakarta. October 2018, new regulations were introduced to allow foreign universities to establish branch campuses. And Chris mentioned those economic zones. There is greater enthusiasm towards using online technology to support face-to-face teaching. COVID helps on that front as well in accelerating that use of the technology. And based on what is happening and previous surveys, there is greater interest within the government to encourage TNE. And most of us have heard that Monash got approval or announced in February 2020 that they're opening a branch campus. And the rumors is that there is another Australian university coming to follow very soon. In terms of the regulation, there are regulations for joint and double degrees. According to the government, distance learning should only be provided by the Indonesian Open University, but I've put but, and Ines later on will update you and tell you about their plans. The ministry is, however, encouraging blended learning, which is very good news for UK universities. And the key rationale from the ministry is that it allows a wider geographical reach, but also allows Indonesian institutions, Indonesian universities to build their own online capacity. We all are familiar with franchise and validate provision. In Indonesia, these are terms that don't exist in the regulations and are fairly uncommon and not used. So it's very different to what we see in Malaysia and Singapore. From the UK's perspective, there is no national register. So unlike what we've got with MQA, you cannot go and find out who's operating in country and what kind of program they're offering, nor is there any published data. So it's very difficult to work out who's in country and how big that provision is. In terms of what we know, Northumbria University, and most people know about this, have had a partnership with BINUS, one of the leading private universities in Jakarta, around the delivery of graphic design, interactive digital media design, and fashion. These are double degrees that operate entirely at BINUS. Coventry and the University of Indonesia have signed an agreement for the delivery of an MSc Aviation Management. And this includes both elements of in-country delivery by University of Indonesia, but also flying faculty. The partnership also includes a local employer. So this is very much driven by the needs of a local business partner. University of Indonesia are also implementing double degrees at PhD level, co-tutel with Coventry, Birmingham, Newcastle, and Warwick are also in market looking at joint research, and similarly Newcastle, and I think I mentioned Birmingham. In my former university, we developed a top-up program delivered as a blended learning model, both for business administration and in the areas of graphic design. Manchester Metropolitan have recently, early in 2020, got approval to have their MBA offered with IPMI Business School, where the program is partly online and partly face-to-face. And London Met, with also Raffles College, have agreed to launch a 3-year business admin program. So that is a very high-level overview. There is keen interest from previous conversation we've had. There is interest to establish collaborative programs with UK universities where the programs are entirely delivered in Indonesia. The UK masters, being 1 year, are also very attractive. And if you recall, the enrollment figures show that there is a lot of undergraduate enrollment, but low postgraduate. All these pillars, those initiatives that Chris has identified, will require advanced and high-level skills. The ministry is encouraging and accepting blended learning and is seeing this as a new TNE opportunities, and we see it as a TNE opportunity for UK universities. The subject areas, as you would expect, they're the business, they're the computer science, the engineering, the AI, life sciences, pharmacy. So that's my very quick and brief introduction to the TNE opportunities in Indonesia.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Aziz. Now gives me great pleasure to introduce Ines Sapteno from UNAS. UNAS is a leading research active private university in Indonesia. It was founded in 1949, so it's the second oldest private university in the country, and played a key part in the struggle for Indonesian independence. Indeed, the first president of Indonesia called it the University of Struggle, and since 1949, it's risen to become one of the leading universities in the country. It's ranked in the top 100 and one of the top 20 out of 329 in Jakarta. So Ines will now give you a little bit of an overview of the institution. And as Aziz mentioned, I'm sure she'll talk about their very exciting new project, the Cyber University, to give you an understanding of what private universities look like in Indonesia. Ines, over to you.
Ibu Ines, you're still on mute.
Thank you so much, Charles. Good afternoon and good morning to you in UK. So my presentation will be very brief about Universitas Nasional. Next, please. And this is a little bit about Universitas Nasional, as mentioned by Charles. The university was established in 1949 under the auspices of the Foundation of the Promotion of Science and Culture, the same foundation that currently in 2020, this year, also produced or also launched the Asia Cyber University. That's a full online university, the first one in Indonesia. I'm going to introduce a little bit after this. And then as in Indonesia, all universities should go through the national accreditation done by the Indonesian National Accreditation Board. And fortunately, our university is in the A rank since 2017. And also, as mentioned by Charles, we are in 100 of the, if I'm not mistaken, this is the current number of universities, state and private universities in Indonesia, around 4,000. So, and in the academic year of 2019 and 20, we have more or less 12,000 students, active students. And we also already implemented the blended learning to our 25 undergraduate, 5 master and 1 PhD programs. And as all universities in Indonesia, we are urged, or we are supported by the Ministry of Technology, Science, Research and Technology, or Ministry of Education, also to uphold the 3 pillars of universities or higher education in Indonesia. The first is education, second research, and the third is community services. So our accreditation is based on these 3 categories. Next, please. So we have, these are our undergraduate programs. We have Faculty of Biology, we have Faculty of Engineering, and the study programs such as Mechanical Engineering, Electrical Engineering, Physics, and Engineering Physics. We have Faculty of Social and Political Science. The first is Political Science study program. This is considered so far the oldest political science study program for private universities in Indonesia. And then we have the international relations, public administration, sociology, and communication. We have faculty of economics and business. Previously, it was only the management and accounting, but in the past few years, we also have the tourism. And we have faculty of language and literature, teaching Indonesian, English, Japanese, and Korean languages. We have the faculty of communication technology and informatics with 2 study programs. That's the system information and informatics, faculty of law, faculty of public health. We have 4 study programs. That's the nursing as a profession, and then midwifery as a profession. But we also have nursing as educator. That's what we call here. We call it here. And then we have also the midwifery educator. So these students are taught to be educating students who are going to be teachers in the nursing school or nursing faculty, and then or midwifery faculty or institutions. And then we have the faculty of agriculture with agrotechnology. So and you can see that all of these study programs are accredited. So just brief information that the national accreditation for universities in Indonesia, a university can earn an A accreditation if a lot of the study programs also have A accreditation. Next, please. And then the School of Graduate Studies, we have 5 master programs. Our university is in preparation for more master programs in the near future. So we have the political sciences, public administration, management, law, and biology, and 1 PhD in political science. Next, please. So this is our educational system. As all universities in Indonesia, our educational system use the credit system, and courses are divided into courses or subjects that are designed by the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Research and Technology. And for the undergraduate programs, it takes 4 years of full-time study, including completion of a bachelor thesis. And then we have master programs, 2 years of full-time study, including a master thesis, and a doctorate program that takes 3 years of full-time study with the completion of a dissertation. Of course, for some study programs, thesis, bachelor thesis or master thesis are oftentimes included field works or internships. So for the undergraduate program, the whole credits are 144, and for the master program, 45 credits, and the PhD program, 28 credit units. Next, please. And I have to show you about our focus in research currently is, these are the topics of research that are being conducted by the study programs, focusing on these issues like border and remote islands, marine and coastal areas. As you know, Indonesia is a vast archipelagic country, and so marine and coastal areas research are becoming very important. And urban problems, conservation, and Indonesian biodiversity. And in here, it's actually not environmentally friendly. This is an unfinished. It should be a religious-based environmental friendly. research, and it should be local wisdom, based on local wisdom. So we are encouraging research on religious-based environmental friendly in terms of the conservation and Indonesian biodiversity, including the local wisdom of the indigenous people of Indonesia. And then we have local politics and national defense. To support all of the researches conducted by our faculty members in the study programs, we also have research centers, 18 of them. I think I don't have to read all of them, but I myself also belong to one of the research program. I have actually my colleague attending here, my colleague is Ahmad Yanwar. He's from Cambridge, and he's the head of one of the centers here. Is tropical. It's related with the tropical research. I myself is a member of the Center for Sustainable Energy and Resources Management, and so we have collaborated with some UK universities on this issue. Next, please. The third pillar of Indonesian higher education is community services. And in our university, we focus on the development of the benefit of science and technology for the needs of the Indonesian people, capacity building, local wisdom-based development, intellectual property, and small and medium enterprises. Also advocacy on regulations, monitoring evaluation of state regulations, private and NGO sectors. Next, please. So these are the programs that we developed in the past decades, actually, in our university, building and developing international collaborations to support the three pillars of Indonesian higher education. The first is education, and those are some of the activities that we have been doing to uphold this first pillar, the education in our university. We have a joint degree, visiting scholars, student exchange, joint thesis of probation, internship. And this part, these are done with our counterparts from national as well as international counterparts. Research also, joint national and international research with national and international research centers, NGOs and governments, and then the community services pillar. So in these community services, we are encouraging communities, societies in Indonesia to participate in the development of Indonesia. So the issue of community participation is very important, and capacity building. This is also one of the very important issues in research-based community services and advocacy. Okay, next please. So these are some of our partners for international collaborations. Next, please. As mentioned by Aziz, and this is the latest program developed by our current Gojek minister. We joke about him and we say that he's a Gojek minister. He is proposing, and the universities in Indonesia are trying to develop this new program called the Independent Campus Curriculum. And I just show you a little bit about that, the educational system and process in higher education. So the idea of 6C for HOTS, that is, these are some of the elements, the indicators in which we want students, so the products of university, to be able to have these skills, to be able to compete later on in the real world. So if you see, we accepted students from from secondary education, from schools of secondary education, And then we teach them using the blended learning curriculum, which is an advantage. I agree with you, Aziz. I think this opens up many possibilities. And the blended learning program is to support the 3 pillars of higher education in Indonesia. Education, but now it's included internship, research and internship, and community services. And the result is that it's not only a diploma, but the expectation is that also the graduates will also have certifications, national as well as international certifications, and registered association. So these are some of the challenges that our universities, I think, including our university, is facing nowadays, and we are trying to not necessarily change the whole curriculum, but in implementing some parts of the curriculum, around 40 credit units out of the credit units that we have, to include the independent campus curriculum, where students can do internship outside the university, can study abroad, can also maybe doing some activities that can have credits and can be transferred into the curriculum, into the transcript. We call it the academic transcript, which will accompany the diploma once a student graduates from our university. So this is the last of my presentation on Universitas Nasional. Do I go through the next one, or I stop to the Thank you.
If you could maybe do a few words on the cyber university, just so people are aware of the project. But I think watching time, maybe just a few words, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. I think Asia Cyber University is a new university. It's in collaboration with actually a Korean university, South Korean university, and now it is. This is our first semester. We are accepting new students, and it's full online. There are 5 study programs: the System Information, Informatics, Digital Communication, Management, and Accounting. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ines, for that. Now I'm going to hand over to Oliver Anderson, who is the Managing Director of Ask Consulting, based out in Indonesia. They're a specialist education consultancy who we are working with. They support both formal and non-formal education from preschool right the way through to higher education. So they have a really clear understanding of the full education market within the country. So Oliver, if I can hand across to you.
Thank you. Hey Charles, thank you very much, as is Inez, and of course Chris. Just let me share my screen. Okay, excuse me everyone. Slight technical snafu.
Wouldn't be a webinar if we didn't have one of those.
Oh, absolutely. There we go. That'll teach me not to scale my screen, right, to make it so large. So thanks everyone. I'll fly through this. I'm very cognizant of the time here. So touching on basically what everyone's said, I'll walk you through a couple of the opportunities at this end, and I'll give you some real examples of people we work with and cases that are ongoing. some of the macros, some of the key assumptions. And then, of course, we'll look at the regulatory landscape, as Charles was saying. Generally, the companies that we work with, the investors we work with, fall into one of three buckets. It's either we're too scared to come to Indonesia, it's too complicated, wouldn't touch it with the barge pole, or they have a high level of comfort with that and a certain degree of an appetite for risk, or they're somewhere in the middle. So hopefully what we can do here is present you with a few real examples of how we can move you, if you'd like to move that way, into a level of comfort in terms of regulation, structure, and process to operationalize your services at this end with a reputable partner. So a bit of context, adding to what Chris was saying, the Southeast Asian private education market is 60 billion. This is to 2019 data. Indonesia alone, K-12 and higher ed is 1.2 billion. And what that goes to show is two things. Well, obviously, K-12 and higher ed chew up a massive amount of the spend in Indonesia, but for the largest Southeast Asian nation with a massive economy, it's way behind other markets, particularly, as Aziz mentioned, Singapore and Malaysia. Now, commercially, for investors, for operators looking to come into Indonesia, the key demand drivers remain exactly the same. There's no change in this whatsoever. And basically it revolves around the ideas of increased spending power, affordability, a lot of choices that are made around that, particularly with English proficiency and international education, and of course, the idea of capacity versus demand. There's also great opportunity, which I'll touch on later on, for PPP opportunities as public sector, should be diplomatic here, perhaps can't meet the requirements of the market as it stands. So let's get into the legal grounds for operating within Indonesia. And just a very quick snapshot. Here is just several of the most recent laws and regulations in Indonesia. The four highlighted in bold are relevant to the business model, most relevant for this call, which we'll discuss a little later on. But the point here is one, of course, we have to navigate this as a company, but two, what is more interesting is the commitment to change, as this is one of the themes that Chris was speaking about. From this administration, from the president and the ministers, the new cabinet being put in place, the commitment for change and for involving the private sector and for really developing human capital in this country. You can see the years these laws, regulations were enacted, and they're all in the last 6 years. So there's tremendous positive movement there. So I'm going to walk you through three options. Probably the first two, bricks and mortar, you may not be interested in setting up at the moment, but the third is more of the franchise model. It's not really called that here, as is mentioned. I'll walk you through as well. So basically setting up a foreign university, a new campus here, 100% owned, or rather controlled, because it's the entity that controls or owns the university is actually a non-profit. It's a foundation, so there's no shareholding. I'll get to some of this later on. These requirements are from the regulations in Indonesia, so they're verbatim. And really, we've distilled a lot of the requirements here. And as you can see, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not impossible. As Aziz was mentioning, Monash are already here with a branch university. There's at least another couple on the way. There are considerable tax breaks and incentives if you choose to go down this route. And contextually, you should probably be aware that regulatory-wise, the higher ed regulatory landscape is no different than the K-12. But what is different is the K-12 market for foreign investment is far more developed than higher ed, which is slightly lagging. So the model is the same, and so it can be utilized the same. It just hasn't been put into effect as much yet. The second option is a JV with a local university. Again, bricks and mortars. The benefit here, of course, you have a local partner, and you can award local degrees as well. So your catchment is quite different as well. And the last one is basically cooperating with a local university here, awarding foreign and local degrees, double degrees. And these are basically some of the requirements you have to have in place. Now, I know I'm going a little bit fast, but we're going to share the deck with you, and hopefully we'll answer some questions at the end. So these are the three most common forms of foreign universities coming to Indonesia that we see at this end. So if I can percolate that down a little bit more into what this actually looks like structurally, and this is making it very simple. The first structure looks like this. And basically, the foreign university sits on the top over its non-profit entity. It's actually not a non-profit. It does generate profits, but those profits cannot be redistributed as dividends, have to be reinvested into the institution. But of course, behind this, there are very legal mechanisms to get control over the entities in terms of the service provision and in terms of finances, and to extract profits out of the university and repatriate them as well. This is not some dark arts, it's perfectly legal. We've done this for many organizations in Indonesia, and we've even secured loans from the World Bank, International Finance Corporation with it. So it's just possible. It's just a matter of what your appetite for risk is and your level of comfort with that. This is what the JV looks like. We don't need to spend too much time here. Now, moving forward quickly to how a franchise or management or cooperation model, as it's called at this end, would look like. And that's basically providing service provision with a local university. Just as Aziz was mentioning, one of our, strangely you mentioned Raffles College. We work with the holding company of Raffles on a number of projects. And this is the model that they've used. So first of all, we'll look at probably the mechanism that you won't be looking at, and that's really a consultancy provider. And for that, you need a management agreement that's put in place between yourself and the local university, and the scope of work is basically back office support that you can provide. The revenue stream is, of course, upwards, paid to a different jurisdiction, as it could be with any service provider, or onshore, depending on what your preference is, if you have a representative office here. Now, really, this is the one we'd probably want to spend slightly more time on, and this facilitates the degree awarding and a lot of other collaborative opportunities. And it's exactly the same mechanism, but what is in place here, it's basically an MOU and a co-op agreement. Within that, you probably include your branding rights, some of your IP as well, and the opportunities, the scope that actually provides. We've laid it out here. It's basically scholarships, internships, of course, degree awarding, and some pretty loose areas of collaborative areas within that, which could be revenue generating. So finally, it's important to mention, if once the structure is there, the regulatory landscape is there to support UK universities coming in here, but in terms of administrative support, government support. So yesterday, prior to this call, my team and I had had a session with Professor Nizam and Professor Aris, who are the Director General and Director for the Directorate of Higher Education, which, as Aziz was saying, oversees public and private sector higher ed from beginning to end in Indonesia. And these guys sit below the minister, and extremely excited about this opportunity and what Bricham and Charles and his team have put together with you guys here. And they really asked that if there are any learnings that I could share with you, we could possibly put it into 4 clear areas. That's with regards to funding. There are certain funding options there, which depends on your model of business as well. The funding options are generally around matching or research grants. Consortium of Singapore universities have received a large research grant. MIT got $20 million for that. Of course, there's certain requirements from the government to do so. They're very keen to open up their network, which is no small ask, working with Bricham and UK universities to provide access to private and public universities within Indonesia. Partnerships, the type of profile of university they like is no different than all good universities do now. They have industry partnerships, commercial partners that they can bring. I'm sure Bricham will support that and facilitate that at this end. And finally is the preparedness. And the frustrations to do with the lack of momentum around several MOUs and cooperation agreements that have been signed with private and public universities. And this is frustration by the universities, but mentioned to us by the ministry, is really the level of preparedness hasn't been there. Now, a lot of these efforts have been stymied by COVID, but the learning is that if you partner yourself with a great provider whose service provision can be delivered online, then operationalizing your services can be done very quickly in the market, which some other providers haven't necessarily done at the moment. As an organization, this is what we do and how we're willing to support Charles and Bricham. And with that, I'll pass it straight back to Charles, because I haven't quite gone quick enough. I'm 1 minute over time.
Thank you, Oliver. That was great. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, we are running a little bit behind schedule, which is predictable, I guess, with these things. And I know that there'll be people who are attending who need to shoot off and do meetings. But if I could just hand across to Chris, just to see if there are a couple of questions that have come in that we might as well take advantage of Oliver and Ines being here to ask the questions.
Thank you very much, Charles, Oliver, Ines, Aziz. Only, 35-40 minutes between you, but you covered a huge amount of ground. Really appreciate that. There has been, there's been a particular question and a compliment, and I'd like to share this compliment from Stephen Williams of Nottingham Trent University, and that's of Ines, who he found your presentation very enlightening and very open and transparent in terms of what your university is doing and what its plans are. He's particularly pleased to understand the insight that you provided in terms of local partner perspective. But he is interested to know what UNAS's priorities are for TNE, both from a model and also a subject perspective. Now, I'm suspecting that perhaps this might be better taken offline with Charles, with UNAS. But I think if there's anything in general you'd like to say, Ines, rather than perhaps a specific answer to that question, that would be helpful.
You're muted, Ines.
About the TNE, I think based on the British Council report, we are in the context of TNE, we are in the 4th group. Indonesia is in the 4th group. The first is the Malaysia. So this is probably, it's not you, TNE is not you, but we are probably struggling to cope up with the regulations, cope up with the challenges that we are facing in the to uphold the pillars of education, the education, research, and community services. So, but now giving this opportunity to us, I mean the idea of the TNE is very appealing actually at this time, and I think we believe, I have informed my colleagues, the deans of faculties and research centers, and they are very interested to consider probably some of the ideas proposed by you, Charles, or by the Charles Consultancy Group, which I think we would like to pursue further, what we can do in terms of this context of TNE.
Okay, thanks, Ines. Mindful that we are late. I'd just like to bring in Oliver, if I may. Oliver, in terms of you have represented certain universities in trying to set up models that are appropriate to legal frameworks of Indonesia. What have been the main hurdles? Very, very quickly.
The main hurdles is actually comes from the education institution themselves. Once there is a degree of comfort, which there should be, there's a very supportive framework here, and there's a very supportive administration that sits on top of it, that's implemented unprecedented change within the education sector and more broadly in terms of foreign investment in Indonesia. But I would encourage everyone, if you're serious about coming to Indonesia, to obviously it'd be best if you have had international exposure and you're familiar with Southeast Asia or China or India, where it's similar regulatory landscape. But just do your homework, speak to guys like us or a few others around there who can give you very clear guidelines of what can and can't be done. Manage your expectations, and above all else, Chris, you'll know this, find a good partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just about to put in, from a market access point of view, actually with Indonesia, it doesn't matter what sector you're going to. If you are looking for things to be as perfect as Singapore, it is not the case. There are one or two extra challenges. There are one or two extra road bumps. There needs to be a little bit of a slightly augmented appetite for elements of risk, but all of those things can be managed with the right partners, with the right experience around you. Thanks for that. So when it comes to partners, you actually, all three parties have mentioned the importance of networks, and Brit Cham is very, very pleased and proud to be hosting this particular webinar. And of course, that is our domain, networks. As has been mentioned, we've recently established our Human Capital and Education Centre. There are 10 British universities, mainly from what I would call the more modern universities, most of whom have been introduced to us directly via Charles's own network. And just to say, those that are in there are De Montfort, Glasgow Caledonian, Liverpool John Moores, University of York, Teesside, York St John, Wolverhampton, Leeds Beckett, University of West England, University of Lincoln. And they're with us because they have strengths relating to employability in relation to certain qualifications that are in some way or another aligned to either gaps that Indonesia has in the talent pool or goals, national goals that are prevalent. This particular initiative is rather more about recruiting students to go into the UK, and what you've heard today is support initiatives from Charles Cormack and his organization to help you with partnerships, and in Oliver's case, perhaps even to set up something more formal in terms of maybe even an own campus. We're looking for 4 or 5 other universities, and I know that there are 20 odd universities not mentioned that are on this particular call today. So if you'd like to talk to us about how Britcham can represent you in terms of student recruitment, then that's great, because the natural follow-on is everything that you've heard today. Private sector relationships, relationships with Indonesian universities that are rather more dynamic and have an appetite for internationalization, taking the lead from, as Oliver has mentioned, the Director General of the different education units that there are as well. And our role is to support, and we will support. I think with that, Charles, I've had my plug. I think this has been an absolutely excellent hour, and I hope that either through your own organization, Cormac Consulting, and or in association again with Ask Consulting, in particular together with our member focus group, that perhaps we can drill down a little bit further into some of these opportunities. And I think we could take some lead from Inez on that, as to exactly where the appetite and need lies. Charles.
Perfect. Yes, indeed, Chris. Thank you very much. And I'd like to obviously say that we'll be following up with all of the universities who've been on the call, and we'll also, as I say, be working with ASK and with the British Chamber. And I would urge any institutions who are interested in recruitment from Indonesia to have a look at the excellent service that has been set up. Jenny is sort of heading that up within Britcham, and be happy to share any information and link you up with Jenny to discuss. So I'd like to just finish off by thanking Ines very much, thanking Oliver very much for their time, and obviously Aziz, I better thank him.
Thank you very much.
Later. Thank you. And of course, Chris and Shella and Jenny and Asti and the wonderful team at British Chamber. So thank you very much. I hope that was useful, and we will be in touch soon.
Our pleasure always. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.